Hello and welcome to your favorite comic book YouTube channel, Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Jim Rugg.
I'm Ed Piscor.
If you're new to Cartoonist Kayfabe, first of all, welcome. And second, this is a daily YouTube comics channel. We have about 1,400 videos available in our catalog, and you can search for your favorite titles and creators if you go to our YouTube page and put in your search criteria in the little magnifying glass box and see if we have already covered your favorite comics or creators. And if we haven't, leave a comment below this video because we do keep a list of to-read pile. And if we get enough requests for your favorite book, it'll move right up that list. I also want to remind everybody that we have a Cartoonist Kayfabe Patreon that will give you access to our videos early. And in the case of the King Kayfabers, you will get access to our videos first, which offsets the kayfabe effect. That means if we show something that is rare or hard to find, you'll be the first one tracking down those copies before they disappear or go up in price. So check out our Patreon, see what level works for you. And without further ado, Frank Miller's Ronin Book 6. We have been going through Ronin book by book, and this is the climax of the series. So we have a Frank Miller playlist that features all of our Ronin coverage, including the artist edition. If you're new to Ronin, I highly recommend you check out those videos. One of the most influential comics, I think, of the 1980s, really changed the game in a lot of ways, and I have enjoyed going through these. A little bit sad to be at the last issue, but excited to kind of see how this story reaches its conclusion.
Did it answer all your questions?
It answered a lot of them.
And it left you with more?
It left me with a couple, but I do think I had read this out of order.
Yeah. And
reading it in order, I feel like Miller really is hurting cats at times early in the series and brings it together pretty well. I mean, this is an ambitious comic that is hard to describe how ambitious it is in 1983, 1984 for a Marvel DC book. And I applaud Miller for really going for it and doing something that, quite frankly, those other Marvel DC books were not doing.
Yeah.
He invents a whole new story, new characters, new format, even doing this graphic novel that infuses manga and European influences. I mean, he is swinging for the fences, and I think he lands it pretty well. So, at this point, our main character, the title Ronin character here, has been recaptured by Aquarius, the AI, potential AI bad guy of this series. And he had started out as Billy, a character with a little bit of psychic ability maybe, but no limbs. And so the way the series starts with that character is they're developing cybernetic technology to make up for that lack of limbs. And it goes off the rails because it turns out our main character, Billy, is a much greater psychic power than maybe anybody had realized and creates this whole fantasy world of Japanese samurai and Ronin warriors and demons that are going throughout time and basically chasing him to this future New York City, this future fallen world, if you will. And
yeah, so it's all kayfabe. Like the entire first issue, all that stuff is kayfabe. But that's established here in this issue. And I almost have to read the comic again because there are instances where the demon is dealing with people that aren't Billy and shit like that, and it's from a completely different point of view. So I guess we're supposed to imagine that just Billy has such a big influence on the universe that he's like created the Matrix, because you could call bullshit on it really, because like he's nowhere in the mix at all, but people are interacting with like the demon. Like when a demon takes over the main dude,
mm-hmm.
Billy ain't around that shit, so
that's a good point. That's not the one I thought of. The question that I came away from is Virgo is the voice of the AI, and it seems like Virgo is corrupt and evil.
Yeah.
And I don't get where that comes from, because the way the story starts, I don't get that impression. Virgo
right.
Seems, maybe a benevolent, character to start with. And as you say, the demon inhabits the owner of the company, which makes sense that owner goes off the rails. But I don't know about Virgo. And it makes me wonder, is both Virgo and Billy sort of playing with everybody around them?
I feel like Miller had to write his way out of a paper bag with this, and he came up with an endpoint that is almost, and then they woke up.
Yes.
I actually think it's kind of whack, and I don't think he stuck the landing.
I like this drawing a lot.
Me too.
It's almost a doodle.
I think it's blown the fuck up, because it's on the same piece of paper as this, so it is so. I think he drew it so small and it got blown up for the comic size.
One of the fun things going through this reading is we read an interview with Frank Miller talking about Ronin before it was done, and he was saying how he's like learning to ink in this series. And I think by this issue, he's kind of figured out a lot.
Yes.
He's in control of a lot of that inking, and we'll see some beautiful examples. But this kind of almost sketchy, quickly drawn piece, it makes me think of how many artists talk about how vital their sketches are, their pencils are, their roughs are, but then by the time they get to tightened inks, you lose some of that life. Miller keeps that life in that drawing, in my opinion.
This is the issue where he sort of codifies all the stuff that he's been practicing for the past 5 issues. He brings it into one cohesive whole. Here's Aquarius. Like, if you remember early on, the 2-page spread might be this section blown up, and then you would see Aquarius kind of come around. But now it's taken over the whole island.
This is one of the most fascinating parts of this story to me, is the idea of AI running out of control
Like
and taking
a tumor.
Like a tumor, like maybe nanotechnology, like anything that's potential to get out of control, the monster that's created in the lab and is now taking over the world. I don't know that that was a big thing in 1983, but I feel like today, that's a great piece. You know, it really paints Virgo and Aquarius. I think some of the characters have changed in terms of who the protagonist and antagonist are. You know, in the beginning, we have Demon and Ronin.
Right.
By this time, we have Casey, who's the security officer, and Aquarius, who is the runaway AI. And that's what I see in this page, and I think it's really interesting and pretty far ahead of its time for, where the series was and where science maybe was publicly at that time. So Casey has kind of taken over this series, I think, as a protagonist, and you could describe her as Elektra. Look at her with 2 samurai swords, trying to get back into Aquarius to save Billy, who Aquarius has kidnapped or gotten control of up to this point in the series. So she's trying to sneak back in to save him, but also to stop Aquarius from whatever takeover they're planning. And so she sneaks in using somebody else's gear, but man, it's a lot of work to get her about 4 steps into Aquarius before Aquarius sees right through her disguise.
Right. All he needs to do is ask her to say something.
And some of the other characters who are part of that security team, is his name Learned, I think, is like the guy who's going to be helping the humans counteract Aquarius in this issue.
Yeah, this sequence
Learned,
here.
yeah, Mr. Learned.
This sequence here, so he's like the Harry Dean Stanton or Yaphet Kotto mechanics in Alien, like that low level kind of worker.
Yeah.
And this sequence like illustrates that. It feels like a Dan O'Bannon like Alien moment. But if you you take the color away, you got I forget her bar, Sadie's bar or something in Sin City.
You really do, especially with like that smoke pattern.
Yeah.
That stuff is really something that'll carry over and show up again in Sin City a decade later. This video is brought to you by the books that we make. My upcoming releases include 1986, a zine celebrating the biggest year in comics history, True Crime Funnies, BW Zine. My next release is Street Angel Princess of Poverty from Image Comics, coming this November. Street Angel Deadliest Girl Alive and Hulk Grand Design are both available now wherever books are bought and sold. Ed Piskor's upcoming releases include Hip Hop Family Tree, The Omnibus, X-Men Grand Design Trilogy, reprinting all 3 of the X-Men Grand Design books, and Red Room, available in 2 trade paperbacks, as well as the current series Crypto Killers. And now back to the video. You see our demon confronting the Ronin. Is that demon is Aquarius the demon, on its own, to answer your question, Ed, because this is the, again, owner of this company. We think he's been possessed by the demon, but possibly it's just the influence of Aquarius with a bigger agenda and starting to really influence the humans around them.
Right.
And you see Casey going between this present and the Billy's fantasy world, a character that we saw in issue 1.
Right, the shrew, so cool.
And you see the different drawing styles between, I don't know, I hesitate to say real world because it does feel like we are in the Matrix in the real world
and Gozeki Kojima world.
Right. Yeah, it's almost future and past is probably another way to describe some of this. And defeats the first, robot warrior that she's fighting, but then humans are showing up as part of the security force, and there's a blackout. Blackout being done, I think, by Billy, not by the human resistance, because they are starting to marshal those forces as well. People who are siding with Casey and not believing that Casey has turned evil or is a saboteur.
This is one of the mind-blowing spreads that I remember as a kid. This like sequence where we see the light slowly turn on. You know, he light boxes the pages over and over again. It just keeps adding more and more as you go. I think one of the main things that harms this work is that because it's such a visual medium, I don't know that there aren't many memorable scenes, like visually, you know, like they're all packed up front.
Yeah.
Throwing the sword.
Yeah, issue 1 is very visual.
Jabbing the sword through yourself to like kill the guy behind you. And I think that to create like a memorable work, you have to have more of those. Like think about Dark Knight, and you could recite scenes like Shakespeare in a way of these different moments and stuff. He's not there with the dialogue to create a memorable scene of that level that sticks with you forever. So I think that, you know, in his canon, I think that's why this one is like not at the front of everybody's thoughts, is because there's not so much, all that stuff that we checked out like the past couple of weeks, there's not really very many memorable set pieces or anything. Yeah,
it is interesting. And I think that's a piece of going from like the monthly comic, assembly line comics, you know, Daredevil. It's just, you need 20 pages. And you're almost laying down track. Like there's not a finite ending. It's not one graphic novel approach. And I think that this was just a bizarre, different experience. And so, you know, like I say, I think the protagonist changes partway through the series. You know, like I think this is really something that maybe got away a little bit. And then it's like, okay, make some adjustments, keep going. Just super ambitious. In this sequence, Casey is visiting with her husband, who Aquarius has imprisoned. The husband is the architect of Aquarius, kind of built this software that has, you know, become sentient, and eventually kills him in front of Casey, you know, his partner. And we're going to see him actually come back briefly as like a cyborg under the control of Aquarius in a little bit. But you do, I think, see the stakes as this goes along.
Totally. And I'm going to pay a lot of attention when we get to that part, because I think if you would have made that a little bit more bombastic, a little bit bigger, that was an opportunity to create like a real memorable sequence. Because, like, to be honest, I don't even remember that scene from when I read it like 2-3 times before.
Yeah, I wonder, you know, like doing that 16-panel grid and stuff, if at times it's a good idea, but now you're a little bit locked in, right? Like instead of having some huge impact moment of this kind of big character being killed, it's stuck in this 16-panel grid, which plays out, you know, throughout this book. Maybe not always to the best effect.
Right.
In this case, the machine's got Casey dead to rights whenever suddenly it's blown up, because Billy is more powerful than anybody expects.
Right.
So he kind of saves the day there. Learn it again, trying to regroup the troops, and we're going to send our leader from demon form back to human because there are problems happening. The human resistance is making things harder for Aquarius. Billy's making it harder for Aquarius.
I really liked the figure drawing here. Like, I have to imagine that Frank used a little reference, because like this stoop of the chest, you know, the sort of bent trunk, and the way the gravity of like the boobs and stuff like that, and where the shoulders are. I think that's a very good piece of figure drawing. This is a real fun, like, it's shades of Martha Washington. Like it makes me think of video games. Like I could fuck with a whole comic where it's just some chick running left to right, destroying things.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's also, I think we've said in past videos, belief that this is done as spreads. And you can kind of see that, you know, like the way the tiers are the opposite tiers across the spread.
Right, yeah, where the blacks are kind of, it's checkerboarded.
Yeah, and the blacks, we should say, is Billy and Aquarius going back and forth talking.
So this is a piece that he picked up, right? Like Frank Miller, as artists, like have two different kind of like dialogue things finally, because like that was a big complaint that we had early on.
Yeah.
So he's adding a piece to his comic book language, which is noteworthy.
Yeah, it makes it very clear who's speaking, which is kind of a challenge, you know, if you're not going to have any drawing in that panel.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good problem to solve.
Also, by the way, like if this comic, he started making it in 82, and it's like 84 is nearly done, you need to shave some corners a little bit, man. Get these fucking pages in already. Get it out of your life.
And this is Casey's husband, brought back from the dead. You can see the biotech taking over where he had his gaping chest wound from being shot.
It's so good, man, because it's a total zombie. We've seen this language in the comic in the beginning, and it was like apparatus. It was accessories, but now it's barnacles. It's symbiotes.
And Casey has to do the tough move. We've seen the blam a lot throughout this series, something that'll go into Sin City again a decade later. But
yeah, see, having it at the 8-panel grid maybe was not the move.
And at this point, all the obstacles have been removed. It's time to get to the heart of Aquarius and have your showdown with Virgo. The owner of the company, dressed up as a superhero, by the way. You know, I mean, even a lightning bolt on his chest. He's basically saying, you know, what's going on here. And that allows Lerna to say, hey, if this is being subverted, we should evacuate people.
Right.
Which is kind of a nice moment in that you remember that this place is occupied by a bunch of workers, a bunch of human beings.
Yeah, the way they talk about it, and in some ways, it's almost like the haves and the have-mores. Like rich people live there or something like that. You know, like it's almost like there's like some sort of... We saw what the city is, but like all the bougie people live there or something.
And this is where we get some reference from her husband before he's killed about the fantasy nature of this entire story being in Billy's head.
Full exposition to just, you know, it's the St. Elmo's fire or whatever, St. Elsewhere freaking snow globe of the little touched boy looking at the snow globe of the hospital. Like, everything that we just read, throw it all out the window because it's just a fantasy of that human Thanksgiving turkey.
I think it's really cool trying to figure this out as like fantasy versus, I hate to say reality because it's so fantastic, the present setting, but this physical world versus this fantasy interior world, and yet you mirror that visually. Mm-hmm. I think that's a pretty cool idea for a comic book. You know, comics work so well that way, especially when you can do it as a spread and you can see both worlds at the same time, and layouts make it clear that it's the same.
Last issue, so like that's the like the subtext, that's the subtle stuff that he's been building this entire thing when we get to see that stuff. So like when he's appropriating a horse and he's got Casey, like he finally has his like casting his spell on her, so she's a part of that stuff. The best spread was last issue when you have like those like demon bat things coming down.
Yes.
And you have the spread and you have the demons on the left page and then robots on the right. And it all becomes so clear. You know, she's like rubbing her eyes in the middle and then her eyes are open there and she sees the robots. So she has a push-pull with the fantasy, you know, like she's drugged into it and then she sees the reality.
Frank Miller work, a common theme. Guns just go through all of this stuff.
Yeah.
To the point of like, I don't know what that is. If that's like the apex of 80s action movies, you know, infiltrating pop culture.
And he just likes that hard-boiled kind of stuff. You know, it's still action stuff. He's a pulp guy. I don't think he read Charles Willeford for Sin City. He read it because he wanted to.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, so she frees Billy, and now we're back full on in his fantasy of Ronin, and the idea is, what's it called?
Seppuku.
Yes. That's let's get some honor on you, Ronin. You're free. You've done your mission. We've conquered the demon.
It's funny because like with this hedge of it all being fantasy world, now you can make the excuse that the appropriation, like the cultural appropriation stuff, is like totally fine because we mentioned it in the first episode. You know, it's all like the most surface level. You watch that made for TV movie Shogun, you know, on Easter. Every time it showed up every year, and so like that's the level of culture that you're putting into this comic. So like maybe that's all Billy knows. You know, he just watched Shogun and maybe Seven Samurai a time or two, Yojimbo, and that's all he knows. So it's a good hedge for Frank Miller's kind of like ignorance in a way.
Yeah, and you get detail of him committing this act of
Every
like
bit of
moving
it.
the blade across. Now twist the blade up to your heart.
Yeah. And like, at least he would know it was seppuku because like they call it hara-kiri. You if you ever hear that term, but like it's like lames call it that. Like everybody who's like weeb like is a seppuku, but hara-kiri is just like, oh yeah, you stab yourself in the stomach, and it's like no, there's a whole process, man. It's twisting, it's lifting, and then you got to get your head chopped off at the end.
And it seems like the idea of Billy being killed is the thing that ruins Aquarius.
Right.
Yeah, it is kind of hard figuring out some of these concepts.
And if you didn't think that those robots were Fugitoid before, like really take a look at them right now. It's a whole bunch of Fugitoids.
Yeah, and speaking of the ambition of this comic, that's expensive to put your 4-page pull out in a book.
And you get paid for each of these pages, and yeah, it's pretty epic, but kind of whatever.
And I gotta imagine this is the idea that she died in that explosion,
Right.
and this is some sort of
Set them free, like
right.
You know, like the stuff that happens with your pineal gland on your last moments that you hear people talking about, like, you know, you're in euphoria.
Very Windsor Smith-esque, some of the inking on that figure to me.
Totally. Like, he's been pulling a lot of that Kaza kind of heavy metal-ish kind of marks, but I totally see that BWS type vibe.
The argument for Return to Ronin being the protagonist is that it's Billy's fantasy.
Right.
You know, like Billy's died, and this is kind of his fantasy. In issue 1, we established that he has feelings for Casey, the security officer that works Aquarius there.
Yeah.
So you wonder, like, this may not be her ending. This may be his ending that we're seeing in the afterlife.
Right. And Frank Miller draws some weird dicks in the future. You have to imagine that was a conversation with DC.
It makes me wonder, like, looking at the artist edition, if you'll see some whiteout and cross-hatching added there.
Right, or just some pencil, you know, some pencil erase marks and stuff like that. Because, you know, he's not shy about drawing the junk.
So that's your Ronin conclusion. I wonder the mindset of Miller by the time he turns this thing in. You know, if it's a book that took maybe twice as long as originally scheduled.
Yeah.
Ambition all over the place on every page and every character. I wonder, like, what his takeaway was.
It feels like, and this is 100% me just projecting, that it feels like he might answer that in the same way that, like, Klaus did with Velvet Glove, where he's putting together his first big project. He's a little bit whimsically minded with constructing it, and now he's got to figure out how to get the fuck out of it. And I think at a certain point, you just want to be done.
Right.
You know, I feel like I see that on the page. I don't see joy in storytelling. I think he bit off a lot more than he could chew, and he's doing his best to get out of it. And I think he took some writing shortcuts, certainly to explain, like, the fantasy stuff, just done in text. Like, I think he would have a different way to approach that, because, like, that should be a scene. It's a very important, pivotal piece, and to have it as, like, a dialogue thing, it's not very good comics. But he just is like, fuck it. Like, let me get out of here.
One of the things I think we might look at coming up is Frank Miller's Comics Journal interview from 1985. Mm-hmm. Because it would have been following this, but at the time of that interview, I think he's 28. He's working on Dark Knight Returns. He's working on Elektra Lives Again. I don't know if he started Elektra Assassin yet. He might have, but also Daredevil Love and War with Bill Sienkiewicz. All of this stuff, like, you know, within a year after this, is on his you know, schedule. Like, he's working on all these different pieces that are huge and ambitious, and really the stuff that he ends up being most successful with comes, like, right after this. So I'd be curious to revisit that interview, because it's been years since I read it, and I imagine they must talk about Ronin and that experience. The other thing that you know, you talk about, like, this taking maybe a little bit longer to finish. We read the interview where he's about an issue into it before it's published. And he's, you know, there's a lot of expectations on his part and excitement and energy around it. I wonder what critical reaction was for him, because, like, I think sales are disappointing after the first issue. And I think there may have been either negative feedback or no feedback, which is something I remember Bill Sienkiewicz talking about with Elektra Assassin. Whenever that issue comes out, it's kind of like weirdly silent, because I don't know that critics know what to make of it within the comics landscape at the time. And it seems like when we talked to Bill Sienkiewicz, that was something that it was a weird thing to get back. You know, you put all this energy into a project that's ambitious and out there and really new, and then not to get some kind of, like, chatter about it. It's hard. That's a weird thing to be met with. So you wonder, like, if Miller's in the middle of Ronin and whatever, you know, comes back in that early stages, if it's like changes his plans, affects him at all. I don't know the answer to that, but I bet some of that probably comes up in that interview. So I'd be curious to read that almost as, like, the wrap up of Ronin, and see what he takes from it, what his thoughts are shortly after completing it.
You know what we might have to do next week, man, is get the Kim Thompson piece, the infamous Kim Thompson piece, and then do that interview. I have the big TCJ.
I have that issue too.
Yeah.
So it's definitely one that we could duck into. But man, rereading this has been amazing. Like, I'm so happy that we went through this. I would highly recommend it to fans of Frank Miller, fans of 80s comics, comics history, Marvel, DC history. I think this book really has a lot of avenues, vectors of interest coming out of this book. It's really almost like your lab experiment. And then I think so many comics sort of learned from this, did little pieces from it.
Totally.
Really a cool time going through this in chronological order, issue by issue.
Yeah, on the flip, the Alan Moore version of this for me is V for Vendetta, and that could be one that we go through in this kind of piecemeal weekly kind of fashion.
I'll say this too. I don't know that this is totally successful as a comic. As we've talked about, there's some real shortcomings to it. I think the marketplace was just weirded out by it. The stuff that isn't totally successful in a lot of ways is often the most interesting stuff.
A lot of times.
At least for talking about, for conversation, like, there's so much I feel like if we reread this, I think our response would be different again.
Right, totally. Because even just like with what we know about the big reveal, which is kind of like a fizzle to me, I at least have that fresh in mind for like a second read.
Yeah, I would be curious to reread it with that in mind too and see, like, do you think this was the original plan, or do you think we made changes on the go?
Right. Good to go, Jimmy?
Yes.
Kayfabers, like, follow, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the bell so that we can notify you when new videos are available. We are a daily YouTube platform, and we have more than 1,400 videos up there as we speak. There is a Frank Miller playlist, and all the Ronin videos are a part of that Frank Miller playlist, but we might have talked about your favorite comics. If we did not talk about your faves, go to the front page of Cartoonist Kayfabe, hit the little search box. It's a magnifying glass on the front page. Search for your faves. If we didn't talk about them, then please let us know. We could push those books higher up on our to-read piles. We have a Patreon, and the King Kayfabers on the Patreon get all of our videos before anybody else. We also have a private YouTube stream where we got about 24 King Kayfabers in there right now. We're chopping it up. We're talking comics, and they get access to the stuff that we talk about first on the aftermarkets. I see people buying things that we talked about in previous videos that we did. Ultimately, the vids are brought to you by the books that we make, and the holiday season is rapidly approaching, and the Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus is coming to you in October. That's next month. This means that your comic shop needs to order it right away so that we know where to ship these damn copies that we have left after all the online pre-order people. It's the 10-year anniversary of Hip Hop Family Tree, 50th anniversary of hip hop as a culture. So we had to do it up fresh with these 150 extra pages, man. A lot of extra value for your buying dollar, and I'm very, very proud of this book, so I hope you add it to your bookshelf. The X-Men Grand Design Trilogy trade paperback is coming to you in November, and I'm pretty sure your shop can order this at this point right now. Make sure you scoop this one up, man. It's going to be a great addition to the library, and some of my X-Men Grand Design works are out of print. Red Room is the current focus. Trigger Warnings and the Antisocial Network trade paperbacks are out there for you to grab off the shelves right now. I'm serializing Crypto Killers, the last round of Red Room comics. I believe all 4 issues are probably out on the stands right now. But this 3rd issue right here, you want to make sure you snap that up ASAP, because the backup feature called Latchkey Kids, these are the first appearances of the characters I'm going to be focusing on in my daily comic strip that I'm going to begin serializing publicly in January 2024. But I have them exclusively coming out every Tuesday to my patrons on Patreon. Jimmy, why don't you tell the people what you got coming up?
My next release is Street Angel Princess of Poverty from Image Comics. It'll be out in November. You can pre-order that one now at your local comic shop, and I hope that you would do that so Image knows how many to print. It is a companion piece to Street Angel Deadliest Girl Alive, also from Image Comics. It'll be a similar size and format, so it'll look great on your shelf, and together these 2 books will collect all of the Street Angel comics that I have made so far. I also have Hulk Grand Design while supplies last. I do believe this is out of print at the distribution level, which means buy it up if you see it in your store and you haven't already, because once these are gone, no guarantee that they'll be reprinted, let alone when those will be available again. So grab that book now while you still can. And I've been making and self-publishing stuff lately, including these 2 zines. BW zine showcasing a lot of the black and white explosion comics, 1986 zine highlighting the greatest year in comics history, everything from Dark Knight Returns to Mouse to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle knockoffs. What a year this was, and 80 pages really showcasing that. I also have True Crime Funnies. 3 nonfiction stories, including 2 wrestling yarns. You can read these now on patreon.com/JimRugg, or you can get a print edition coming soon later this year. Will be available on my website.
There are some other ways to support the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel. Jimmy, if you will illuminate the masses.
You can subscribe to the Cartoonist Kayfabe e-newsletter at the links below this video. You can also find Cartoonist Kayfabe t-shirts, merchandise, hats, mugs, stickers, and more at our spread shop. That is also in the links in the show notes under this video.
There you have it. Buy the books, buy the merch, support the channel, keep the videos coming to you on a daily basis. Jimmy, give them the marching orders and we'll be on our way.
Read more comics.